telepathy. We've probably all experienced telepathy in one way or another in our lives, some perhaps more than others. Telepathy works at several different levels depending on your spiritual stage of unfoldment. So the word telepathy comes from tele, which means across, and pathos, which means mind. Therefore, an exchange of information from mind to mind. And exploring the subject of telepathy, there are 4 sub-subjects, so to speak. Firstly, the etheric body, telepathy per se, thought projection, and the anakarana. And we've touched upon these other 3 subjects in other classes. But it doesn't hurt to go over them again. We may get insights coming from a different angle. And I find that repetition in the ageless wisdom is always productive. It's always stimulating, is the word I'm looking for. Because it is the ageless wisdom. It doesn't age. We can read a book, one of Alice Bailey's books, and then 2 years later read it again as if completely for the first time. That is the nature of the various levels that these books can be experienced. So the etheric body is a potent receiver of impressions which are conveyed to the human consciousness through the medium of the awakened centers or chakras. There is, for instance, no true clairvoyance until either the solar plexus or the ajna center is awakened. So the solar plexus is really the lower sort of clairvoyance, and the ajna center is a higher kind of clairvoyance. These transmitted impressions and information become the incentive whereby conscious activity is initiated. DK says, only in time can we hope to register all the different areas of divine expression. Only when the etheric body is swept into activity under the influence and through the impressed forces of the soul, the mind and temporarily of the astral body, can we become aware of all the worlds, all phenomena, and all states of consciousness. So note that he uses the word mind, or the mental function, and the astral body. The first 2 stages of our meditation, where we imagine with our astral body, and we use the mind in the second part, in the second paragraph of the first part. Of course, this quote is from one of the blue books, as we call them, but this reference here is from the compilation book called Ponder on This. And if any of you have not read any of the Bailey books and are thinking about getting into it a bit deeper, then a good purchase would be Ponder on This, because it has quotes from all the books on all sorts of different subjects. It's a very good book. You can find it online quite easily. So we have the etheric body, the energy field, as we know it, the various different depictions of the etheric body that can be found. So we know that the etheric interpenetrates the physical, and when death occurs, there is a withdrawal of the etheric from the physical. The etheric thread is snapped, so to speak. The life thread, in fact, that is anchored in the heart, is severed when we die. So these 3 bodies represent the personality vehicle of the soul, and the etheric is the medium of transference of energy. Without it, there is no telepathy. The etheric is the receiver, transmitter of more subtle energies, mental or spiritual. Now, in fact, the book by Alice Bailey on telepathy is called Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle. It's got some really amazing passages in that book. It's only a slim one about this thick, on astrology and astronomy. and it can give you some really deep insights into the nature of the etheric body from your own self right out into the solar system and beyond. The etheric transmits to the physical brain consciousness, and the brain, of course, is the physical instrument of the mental body, the software of the hardware, the hardware of the software. Energy is active substance, and force is energy trapped in the three worlds, the lower three worlds as we call them. So you'll come across this continually in DK's teachings to distinguish between that which is energy and that which is force. Personalities affect us with force, yet purified and aligned can transmit the energies of the soul. So the soul is energy and the personality is force, generically speaking. Energies and forces translate through the etheric body via 7 chakras. The solar prana that comes to us comes through the spleen chakra, which is just to the left of the solar plexus. And the spleen chakra as opposed to the physical spleen. Both of them different entities. So, of course, are related to each other. We'll talk more about this on the class on the chakras. Solar prana comes through the sacral center as well, and the rest of the body. So if you expose your bare torso or back or both to the sun for at least 15 minutes every day, you can get a sufficient amount of solar prana. Telepathy, the lowest forms of telepathy would be a flock of birds, fish, or herd of animals all moving in unison. I'm going to try and get this video going here. Whoops, no, it didn't work. Here we go. This is the murmuration of starlings I filmed a few months ago. Quite hypnotic, spellbinding thing to watch, of course. There is a group soul at work there, all in unison, creating great beauty as they swarm together. And likewise, you will see the same in a school of fish, herds of animals. So, instinctual telepathy is between etheric bodies. There's 3 or 4 types of telepathy. So we have your very basic instinctual telepathy, which is related to the original root race, the Lemurian root race, Lemurian communication, instinctual urges for self-preservation and reproduction, base chakra, sacral chakra type of level. Then you have the higher form of instinctual, it's like I have a feeling, or I've got a hunch, which is a feeling astral telepathy, which is instinctual, solar plexus to solar plexus. And this is more in the realm of Atlantean communication, strictly speaking, in terms of the root races. And the solar plexus is the sending or receiving agent. Remember when we said before that when we're looking at the class in the astral body that people leave the body either by the solar plexus or the top of the head, depending on what stage of unfoldment they're at. So if you're reasonably undeveloped, then you'll be leaving from the solar plexus. And so all this goes with that in terms of that kind of telepathy, instinctual telepathy. And so we have the example of a mother and child, the child being in danger, and the mother picks up on that immediately because they are so closely connected. This is instinctual love, and it emanates from the general diaphragm area where the solar plexus is. The baby receives through its solar plexus. Mental telepathy is only just starting to function, we're told, in this fifth root race. So we have the third root race of Lemuria, the fourth root race of Atlantis, this fifth root race, or the Aryan root race, is where we're starting to think and function far more mentally. True mental telepathy uses the heart and the throat. The throat center, of course, is the seat of the mental body. Because we are in a transition period, the solar plexus is still very active. As I've told you before, around about 75% of humanity are still astrally polarized, and hence the solar plexus super active. About 20-25% of humanity are really thinking properly, or at a certain level that's of a higher quality than the rest of humanity. So we use a mixture of instinctual and mental telepathy in this third stage, where the sender uses the throat center and the receiver uses the solar plexus. DK tells us that only from the heart can stream lines of binding and linking energy. Eventually there's a higher correspondence of the heart within the head. The disciple becomes radiatory and magnetic, relating to disciples everywhere, especially so-called pledged disciples dedicated to the service of humanity. Now, someone asked last week or the week before, I think it was Rachel, about the different stages of discipleship, probation, and all that kind of stuff. I found a table the other day that I can send out in one of our letters to you all next week, if you like. Might have to remind me to do that, but I'll try and remember. So, intuitional telepathy, one of the fruits of true meditation, mode of communication of the sixth root race that we're going into will be intuitional telepathy. When we developing intuition, we won't be totally intuitive, but we'll be far more intuitive than this mentally polarized fifth root race. And this type of telepathy works through the head, which is receptive to impression from higher sources, the Ajna center or the brow chakra, which is receptive to idealistic or intuitional impressions, and the throat center, which works with the Ajna center, broadcasting back out what is received and recognized. So there are many mysteries to do with these chakras, these centers, that it's just a whole science in itself. In fact, was one of the main sciences apparently in the age of Atlantis. Now I've got a couple of comments here. Yes, right, okay. I will send them out. So there's an analogy of three modes of work. Instinctual, which relates to train stations everywhere, the so-called telegraph, as it was called back in when these books were written. The mental telepathy relates to the ocean and ports everywhere, and the telephone. And intuitional telepathy relates to air, airports, radio, TV, and internet. And this is where we are now. We are creating the seeds of the sixth root race, a certain portion of humanity who are becoming far more intuitive, telepathically intuitive. Claudia says, where would animal communication fall under? Instinctual. And of course, that's between animals. And there's also animal communication with human beings too, of course, as anyone who's a cat or dog owner knows. And of course, some zodiac signs are more intuitive than others. Some planets in signs are more intuitive than their placement elsewhere in the horoscope. Some rays are more intuitive. I think the 2, 4, 6 line of rays probably has the edge on the 1, 3, 5, 7 line, which is more will mind. 2, 4, 6 line of love wisdom. And I might have mentioned in another class, we call people who are on predominantly those rays astral Buddhic in their polarization. Buddhic, of course, being the Buddhic plane, the plane of intuition or direct knowledge, which is reflected down into the astral body. Heidi says, my dog receives my intentions. A little duck sound you've got, I think it's called. Can't pronounce it properly. Dachshund. All right, so cats, of course, are particularly psychic. And that's a whole other subject, of course. So we have different types of intuition. Gemini is very fast with mental intuition. It's a mental sign. Pisces is a water sign, but it's intuitive from the watery sense or the astral sense, and so forth. There are other examples too, of course. All right, so instinctual, mental, and intuitional. These analogies here are quite useful to think about. Broadcasting, receiving areas of consciousness. We have firstly solar plexus to solar plexus, feelings, emotions, instinctive. Then we have mind to mind, which is starting to be possible. We have many impressions that enhance the complexity of life. Increased mental problems as well. We pick up on thought forms, of course, as we said in the mental body class, and that are not our own, that have been sent to us by someone we know, or we're just tapping into them. We have heart to heart, heart center to heart center, the higher correspondence of instinctual, and comes about through group impression. This is something that the Tibetan continually refers to, about how some things cannot be developed unless it's with a group that you're associated with, a group of meditators. And that stands to reason because we are all linked to an inner group or an ashram of like-minded souls. Point 4, soul to soul. This is the highest possible telepathy. And when there is a soul response, it means that there's an initiation that is imminent. After these first 4 groups that we just discussed, when they're starting to form part of one's experience, the following methods supersede the previous ones. Point 5, soul to mind. The mind is held steady in the light. It becomes aware of soul consciousness. There's an inflow of new ideas from the Buddhic plane, hence less personality identification. And this is the stage of mystical vision and unfoldment. And as I say often, we're all mystics learning to be occultists, learning the universal laws. That's what this whole course is about. And it merely scratches the surface too, of course. Point 6, soul to mind to brain. Same as the above, but also transmits what is received. So these chakras here are fairly accurately depicted, by the way. These different symbols. Notice the square at the bottom of the base chakra, the foundation. The square is the foundation. So the vision can be clothed as a thought form and carried to the brain of the disciple. With correct training, disciple can reach the mind and brain of other disciples. This is where right meditation leads and entails much responsibility, of course, because that can be easily abused and misused. Telepathy probably works quite often in terms of the negative aspect of sending thought forms that are surrounded by anger or jealousy to someone else, and that person receives them. But quite often they come back to the sender like a boomerang. After the previous two types, points 5 and 6 are developed, there are 4 more. There's the master to the disciple, the group ashramic context. One is impressed by the master and taught the technique of contact. Then there's the point 8, the master to the group. The master trains and works through disciples who function on the inner and outer realms simultaneously. Impresses ideas upon disciples, watches their reactions, gauges the united activity group. Very interesting. All of us have probably been part of various groups. Groups have their cycles of growth, of course. And strictly speaking, in the ashram, you can visualize it as a spiral, if you like, and the master is at the center of that spiral, and his closest disciples around him are gravitating towards that center through the magnetic ring pass knots of the ashram. So quite often we can be impressed from the ashram itself, not from necessarily any senior disciple in the ashram or the master himself, but just from the general energy of the ashram. We can tap into that and receive intuitive impressions. Then point 9, the subjective to objective groups. It's not possible for a group to respond to impression unless the heart is awakened, and unless the head is also awakened, the soul is unable to control. And finally, number 10 is the hierarchy, the masters to groups of disciples. And of course, they are working very busily all the time around the world to various groups on the planet in all areas of human activity. Now, heart activity does not necessarily mean one is spiritual. The sun is a symbol of the heart and shines alike on good and bad, we're told. And group activity is a result of heart awakening. Can include bad, non-altruistic groups or even left-hander groups, so-called. Hence, the head awakening is essential for soul control. So, we're told in the blue books that someone who's the head of a large corporation can have a lot of heart activity going on and quite often can suffer from heart problems because of the responsibility that they take for all the employees in that company, whether it's 10 or 20 or 50 or a few hundred. Very interesting. What does left-handed group mean? Well, in occultism in general, not just the Bounty teachings, there's the so-called left-hand path and the right-hand path. So this is where the word sinister comes from. Sinistra, left, dexter, right. And this is why there's been superstition about people who are left-handed, which is kind of, it has its roots in this very ancient sort of application. So the left-hand path take the way of materialism, and the right-hand path takes the way of life, essentially. But you can Google that and read plenty about it from other people's interpretation. So left-handed groups, for instance, might be groups who are practicing materialistic magic or selfishly motivated magic as opposed to altruistic groups. So this graphic of the heart is very beautiful. I think it shows the electrical energy that keeps on sparking the ongoing pulsation of the heart. I do write about this in one of my essays, and I talk about the various nodes of the heart and the electrical energy that's associated with Vulcan, who swings his hammer onto the anvil. It's a similar thing. This rhythmic swinging of the hammer to the anvil has a great correlation to the activity of the heart. This is where the life thread is anchored to, of course, and is related as well to the heart chakra per se. If you go into exploring the heart, and it's 4 different chambers, and the pumping of oxygenated and unoxygenated blood through it, it's some amazing symbolism there, very esoteric. There's a good book by Manly Palmer Hall, who some of you may have heard of, called Man, and it's about the esoteric anatomy. An excellent book to check out. Thought projection is the third theme associated with telepathy. Thoughts are things. They have an existence of their own. They are diverse and varied as everything that is. What we create, see around us, is the crystallized result of the original thought form. The world, of course, is a massive thought form which exists only as the Logos who embodies it gives it attention. The planetary Logos is referred to here, or what we call our local earthly God, who is incarnate in this planet and all its kingdoms. And what is meant by giving it attention is the sounding of the mantram, continuous sounding of the mantram of the Logos that keeps the world going, literally. Thoughts only are as strong as the energy we put into them, of course. If we keep having a nagging thought, that of course can be detrimental. The energy of thoughts is impartial, be they positive or negative. They are built. We attract the devic builders to our thoughts that construct our thoughts into thought forms. So it is an occult truism. Energy follows thought. If we have a thought, it sets energy in motion. Most thoughts are weak, however, and they stay in the aura and dissolve because as a whole, humanity has not learned to think yet. If there's more energy focus, it will travel to another's aura and be received. And this is a form of telepathy, kind of unconscious telepathy. Kim says, who is continually saying the mantras of the universe? The planetary Logos. The special mantram, the Oe Ahu Yihu, something like that. I can't pronounce it properly. It's Blavatsky talks about it in The Secret Doctrine. It's a great big, long, many-syllabled mantra. And he says, would you say that the resonance in the meditation, when you mention the embryonic awakening center with awaken, is it a big part of the union of human family becoming more sensitive to sensible thoughts for the human family? I hope this makes sense. More or less, Andy. Resonance in the meditation. You mentioned the embryonic awakening between the awakened point and the awakening point, I think you meant. Yeah, I mean, any yoga or union within ourselves is going to contribute to the union of humanity, of the human family. Starting with our family, our friends, our work associates, and so forth, radiating out towards. Right. All thought forms must have a medium of transference, and that is the etheric body. We must develop the capacity to discriminate between the thought forms of ourselves and of others. It takes many lifetimes of training to tell real from false when it comes down to heart development. And again, we see what's happened in the last few years where a large proportion of humanity have been duped. Well, in fact, we've been duped for centuries or thousands of years, really. But it's really stepped up the pace in the last few years. And it's because of the lack of mental and heart development that many people have been duped. They don't have the intuition to cut through all the propaganda. So it comes down to heart development, also silence, coming from a quiet place, not getting caught up in mental and emotional tribulations. We can't be like a dog with a bone with some particular thought, you know. We have to be careful and to not get fanatical in our thinking. Then we become receptive, open-hearted to the telepathy from on high. Group meditation development is the quickest way to become receptive to the hierarchy. As I said before, it makes a lot of sense. It's quite logical when you think about that. That because we are parts, we all belong to or are gravitating towards a group or an ashram, depending on our soul ray on the inner planes. So group meditation emulates the ashram itself. The ashram is made up of people at all different levels of unfoldment. It's the beauty. It's like a cross-section of humanity. And likewise, all spiritual groups are made up of people at different levels of unfoldment and find their place in the greater scheme of things. That's one of the testings of the Aquarian age when we will be working far more in groups, is to recognize your place in the path or your niche within the group and play your part accordingly as a team player, as they say. So the group becomes a receiver for a very powerful transmitter, and that is the hierarchy. The group always handles more energy than the sum of the parts. And that's what I constantly emphasize in these meditations we're doing. Within the group context is set up karmic interactions which allow for the development of the heart, the threads of consciousness built between group brothers and sisters, the antakaranics, or the bridges of light. Juliana says, is it possible to touch silence and light and then descend again in the tribulations of attraction and repulsion of matter many times? And if so, at what point of development one is? I think we do that on a daily basis, no matter what level we're at. But as a disciple or an aspirant on the path, the withdrawal into the silence and out of the noise of the crowd is certainly something that's far more favoured. And yet we have to be in the world, live in the world, but not of it, as the old saying goes.
I have been studying you for years, and Michael Robbins, but when we started this group, I started to do I've always been a meditator, but I started to do the meditation from the first day and every day. And I must say that a couple of months ago, it was fascinating to me that all of a sudden I was capable to do the meditation and then go into yoga without even thinking about it. It was like it became a routine in the morning, right? And that was lovely. And then you added the second part, right? And I have a very visual mind, and it's really fascinating us more sensitive to energy that I sense. Okay, so this course is invaluable. I want to say that. And the meditation alone, just like when you switch there was a moment in a class you mentioned, you should meditate, you should do yoga after meditation. That changed everything for me. So it's just fascinating how powerful this is. And even though I've been studying this for a very long time,
Okay.
it has a unity to it, Philip. I can't thank you enough. You've been referred to me from Michael Robin when he was with us.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it from the whole of my heart. Okay. So thank
Great,
you.
lovely to hear, Andy. Thank you. And Ruthie says a similar thing. The group meditation makes me feel warm and happy because it feels like a family while envisioning us holding hands together as we do it. And indeed, the family of humanity. And this is going to become far more relevant in the Aquarian age. I did mention last week, I think, about being careful to go steady with the meditation. Don't go overboard and overstimulate yourself. Juliana says, I already have a daily meditation routine from the school of AAB, and I recite every day the invocation in Italian once a week with your group in English. There's a difference because of the language, yes, indeed. It's been translated into many languages now. I do believe the English version is more powerful because of the way it was originally constructed in English in a mantric numerological way, and a couple of books have been written about this. But I think apart from that, whatever language it's being sounded in, the intention is the key factor behind it. So yes, English is felt more powerful in the head and the Italian in the heart. Interesting. All right, so we're getting to the Anakarana per se stage now, which we dealt with last week. So a few things I'm just going to run through here, which we're all familiar with from that class. It's intrinsic to the science of telepathy. Without any bridges, there is no reception or transmission. Science of the Anakarana is the way the individual uses forces or energy in relation to other individuals and groups. And of course, the Anakarana is the science of light manifestation. Light is highly refined matter, essentially. Everything is matter, just in different levels of refinement. Building with light, visualization. We build with light through visualization. And light, of course, is a major characteristic of the soul and the etheric body. The object of the science of the Anakarana is to fuse the lower and upper lights, soul, the etheric, and so we must study the Anakarana in three ways, as we've mentioned in the other class. Concretely, relative to the etheric body, the light body, and soul-wise, in relation to the light body that we function in. Also in relation to how much divinity is being expressed through the fused light bodies, in other words, the personality vehicles of our mental, emotional, and physical, and according to our own conscious recognition where we are at. And so concretely, we study it, and abstractly in relation to knowledge and wisdom. And here we have the lower mind, the concrete mind, and the higher mind, the abstract mind. Yeah, this picture here on the left, I think is by, no, it might be by Francis Donald, but it doesn't look like, the signature doesn't look like this. This next picture is amazing too. We'll run through this text first, then I'll comment on this picture in a minute. The science of the Anakarana, the problem of continuity of consciousness, the problem of life and death, deals with the threefold thread, the monad, the soul, the personality, the mental, astral, and etheric, which is the reflection of this higher triplicity here. The threefold thread also links the links the consciously created person and the world of ideas, the rain cloud of knowable things that's there for all of us to access. They contact and express through creative work or light bridging. And these 6 points here, the world of souls, the world of phenomena, the realm of the subjective beauty in reality, and the outer tangible world of nature. This is an interesting one, this point too. Subjective, the realm of the subjective and the outer tangible world of nature. Themselves to others, group and group, human and diva kingdom, which of course will be one of the major occurrences or developments that will be explored in the Aquarian age in the next 2,000 years. And humanity and hierarchy, between humanity and hierarchy. So here on the right we have a good diagram of humanity and hierarchy in some ways. We have the three constellations of the Pleiades, Sirius, and the Great Bear up here. Of course, the Milky Way or some great light behind it. And here we have the Ajna Center, the New Group of World Servers, broadcasting down to the 5 planetary centers. It's not quite technically an accurate diagram, but it's a good diagram to use in visualization and meditation. The New Group of World Servers as the Ajna Center is technically the Ajna Center of the planetary logos, the being who embodies this planet. As we've explored before, the life thread comes from the monad, which is anchored in the heart, the seed of life. We have the life thread over here. Consciousness thread from the soul, anchored in the head. Over here on this diagram, you'll see different diagrams depicting it differently. But here we have the crown chakra, the Ajna chakra, the throat chakra, the heart center, solar plexus, sacral, and base chakra. The creative thread, of course, is triple in nature. It unites will, love, and intelligence, which are the petals of the heart lotus, also called sacrifice, love, and intelligence. The threads are woven into one eventually, yet remain distinct. And the science of the Antakarana deals with the entire incoming, outgoing systems of energy. Hence, it is inextricably, the science of the Antakarana is inextricably entwined with the science of telepathic transmission reception. We have the incoming energy of power and will. We have the outgoing energy of love transformed by an individual soul. Science of the Antakarana will dominate education in the future, and the 6 stages of building that we went through last week. Education is the science of the Antakarana. When the bridge is built rightly, the personality can tap into soul experience to guide, educate its expression in the current incarnation. Now, there are more sources, of course. The telepathy is discussed through all of DK's books, but ones here I've listed are RI, which means the rays and initiations, TV, telepathy and the etheric vehicle, and ENA, which means education on the new age. They're just 3 books which you can find more information about telepathy in. The sources of impression come from the disciple's own soul, of course, the affiliated ashram of the aspirant, or direct from the master, or from the spiritual triad involving the monad, of course, if one is at that point of building the Antakarana between the soul and the monad. Science of impression, science of thought form making. Thought form vitalization and direction. Those who are receptive to these fall into 2 groups. One, the purely personality focused, mediumistic, subconscious, even with the highest astral impressions. This is your basic medium that you go to see or perhaps to read your tarot. Of course, though I do realize there are average practitioners and brilliant practitioners using the tarot and other things like that, like the runes and so forth. 2, in the early stages, the transition from the astral to the mental, those who are already functioning on the mental plane. And then the stage where the disciple can distinguish between his own soul and the master, getting direct impression from the master. Next, the impression from the monad or Shambhala, Of course, these are very advanced stages, but we'll all get to experience that at some point in our soul evolution and in some incarnation or another. TK makes a great statement. Sensitivity to impression involves the engendering, hang on a minute, I'll pull this toolbar out of the way. The sensitivity to impression involves the engendering of a magnetic aura upon which the highest impressions play. Elsewhere in the teachings, the Tibetan bemoans the fact that many disciples he can't get through to because their minds are too busy and they're not allowing the intuition to flow as some of them were capable of doing. Of course, we have an impressionistic painting over here. There was an impressionistic artistic era, and ancient and modern. And a painting like this has this, is in a sense the impressions from the emotional body or the astral body, the body of imagination, you'd say. The previous page, Rachel says, when the previous page said when the bridge is built rightly, can it be built the wrong way? Yes, of course. How do you know that is happening? I don't know. How can you avoid it being built incorrectly or correct it if that happens? It's all about experiment and experience. Generally, we are protected from our blunders and mistakes, and if the intention is there, in one respect, there is no wrong way. You know, some people might be sticklers for detail and so forth, but the Antakarana is built through study, meditation, and service. So where the aspiration is there to consciously visualize that building, energy follows thought, and it becomes, it is built from lifetime to lifetime. We keep adding to it. Through your work that you do, through your creative work that you do, I'm not talking about meditation here. You might be an artist, you might be an athlete. These are all activities that build the Antakarana in one way or another. An athlete, for instance, has to focus, be very mentally focused. And in many other spheres of human activity, you name it, there is your area of work where you can build the Antakarana. All right, I think we're just about done. That's the last slide, in fact. You can experiment with telepathy with a friend, perhaps. Broadcast, visualize an image and send it with a pre-agreement, of course, to your friend and see if they get it, and ask them to do the same thing back to you. If someone you maybe not necessarily close to, but have a rapport with, a mental rapport, I think it's worth doing if you feel so inspired. Next week, I think we've got the class on dreams.